Well, hey, good morning, Bay Chapel. Oh, come on. Good morning, Bay Chapel. It is so good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving to you. I hope you have a great week this week. And I want to just start off by saying welcome to those of you that are here for the first time or first in a long time. We are so honored that you're in the house. Honestly, I can't think of a better day, a more impactful day to be here. I believe over the next few minutes, God's going to speak all to us all, and it's going to be different, but it's going to be awesome, man. We had a powerful time in the first service. I want to let you know about a couple of things before we lean in this morning. The first one is this. We've been talking about this for several weeks, and what's coming up December 8th is once a year we give toward our Christmas offering to help meet the needs in the community and around the world outreach. And I want to share a couple more ways that we're going to do that this year, but I want to celebrate because in week one I talked to you about what God is doing through our food pantry. And we had an unbelievable day of outreach yesterday. Up until now, the largest day we'd ever had at the pantry was blessing 300 families. Everybody, yesterday, our Thanksgiving outreach, we blessed 431 families in our community. Isn't that awesome? And I know that on the surface, that's just a number, but when you start to talk to some of these people and know what they're going through and how a full Thanksgiving meal is going to impact their life this week, we're making a huge difference. And some of the other ways locally, I told you, well, last week through Convoy of Hope, and then in the DR, we've got another missions trip coming up in January. It's going to be awesome, and we're doing some things there to make a difference in that church. But I want to let you know, too, that there are some needs in our church, and we want to do our best through this Christmas offering to bless single moms, and we want to bless widows during this season. Some of those that we know about, but there are other situations, and maybe you're connected to them. And so I just want to invite you today, if you know of a need or somebody that's hurting or broken, or maybe you're going to be walking through a lonely season this Christmas, we want to do our best to minister to them in any way possible. So take a connection card during the service. You want to drop it in the bucket at the end, and we're going to use this offering to help make a difference this holiday season. Well, hey, today we're going to continue this series, This Is Us, and it's going to be something totally different. I told you last week, if you missed it, I've asked, and I felt led a month or so ago. Really, the heart behind this series is just to be real about who we are as a community and share stories and know this is that when we link arms and realize we're in this together, we're stronger together. I think one of the greatest tools of the enemy is isolation, or to make me feel like I'm the only one going through what I'm going through. And maybe you've been there before. But today you're going to be challenged and you're going to be so encouraged by the testimony of Dr. Kosj and Jaymi. So would you do me a favor and put your hands together as they come out at this time? Guys, welcome. It's so good to have you. And I just want to say, Kosj and Jaymi, thank you so much for being a part of this. I know this is a really vulnerable thing to share your story. It was such an encouragement in the first service, and I just want to keep it a little lighthearted, maybe get to know you a little bit at the beginning. If you've been here for any amount of time, you know Kosj typically is one of our worship leaders on Sunday and does an amazing job leading us in worship. And I was on the front row a couple weeks ago, and Kosj was transitioning us between a song and was talking, and you don't notice it as much when he's singing, but when he's talking, you're like, man, that guy's from somewhere, but it's not here, you know? And she looked, she said, this lady looked over, where is he from? Because he's got the coolest accent. So Kosj, would you take a second, and Jaymi, tell us a little bit about your background?
Thank you, Pastor Wes and Jen. So I was born in Ghana, which is West Africa, and I'm the last of 4 kids. And so really I came to the United States in 2001. It was actually on a mission work together with my dad and my sister. And I was in my late teens, and I started my grad school as well. And in 2005, that's when I met my beautiful wife for the first time. So she'll tell you more about that.
What he didn't tell you was that he actually was 7 years old when he went to high school and 13 when he went to college. So he's a little crazy genius kind of guy. But as for me, I was born and raised in New York City. And I attended college at Southeastern, like these guys. And like he said, we fell in love and got married in 2008. and moved about 3 or 4 times before we landed here in Tampa.
So what I didn't realize, and I picked this up, if you've talked to Kosj any amount of time, you realize he has a brilliant mind and he remembers everything. And so we have lunch quite a bit, and early on, he would start asking me about my sermons. And I'm like, Kosj, I don't even remember what I talked about in my sermon. But so he keeps me accountable. It's just, he's got a brilliant mind. I would love for you guys just to take a minute and talk about your faith journey, your background. When did you find the Lord, and how has he worked in your life?
So I have a little bit of an unusual one, and you be the judge of it. So as I told you, my dad is a reverend minister, so I grew up in the church. And I was 5 years old. Distinctly remember I was on the party. And I'm telling you, that's where I gave my life to Christ. Not in the church. It was just in the party. I felt like God really touched my heart, and I broke down crying. And right on there at 5 years old, I said, God, I surrender. And I never looked back ever since.
We keep it raw and real here at Bay Chapel. That's right. He did just say potty. Yeah.
Amen. And as for me, I was born into a very loving family that just so happened to be Catholic. And so all of my educational upbringing was in Catholic school, from kindergarten all the way up through high school. And it was then during my sophomore year of high school as a student that I met the Lord at youth group. And that was just a moment that I would never forget. I experienced an encounter with his love, and that burden was really lifted. And it truly transformed my entire life, and also the life of my whole family as well. So they all came to Christ, and over time we all began growing and attending church together until now.
So great. Okay, so I love babies. So tell me about your babies and becoming parents, and what those first years of parenting looked like for you guys.
They were awesome. So we welcomed 2 babies while living in Philadelphia. Zion was born in 2012, and just 18 months later, our Zoel was born. And so we had our babies back to back, and it was just wonderful and crazy and so cold in Philly.
Absolutely. I remember sitting down with, Zion on one arm and Zoel on the other arm, and I was like, man, I'm so blessed. I mean, I don't really deserve this. These are just great kids, handsome and beautiful, talented, funny, just name it. And life was good. I was actually transitioning from my fellowship to Moffitt, where I'm an oncologist there, and I had a job and everything. Everything was good. And then that fateful Thursday, we learned about Zion's diagnosis of a very aggressive brain tumor, and everything changed.
I was thinking about the campaign that Moffitt ran here over the last year or so, and there's been a season where I think Kosj has been like the billboard figure for Moffitt, and everywhere you walk through the hospital, hey, there's Kosj, there's Kosj. And they've had this slogan, your courage inspires ours, and talked about all the testimonies and lives that have been impacted through the hospital. And that's, for those of you that know their story, that slogan just encapsulates their life and what they mean to us. And not only your courage inspires ours, but your faith inspires ours. To know that what you've gone through, and that's what we want to share today, is a little bit about the journey that they've been on with Zion. And so before we share any more, we just want to turn your attention to the screen and watch this video.
I'm Kosj Yamoah. It's my wife, Jaymi Yamoah. I'm a physician scientist at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida.
I'm a special education teacher. I work in early intervention and with children with autism. Zion was born in June of 2012.
Even before he was born, he would dance to every music that we play at home or in the car. And we knew that he was just musically inclined, even before he was born. So life was good. Zion was a very vibrant young boy. There were a few subtle signs that was already going on. I think the night before, he actually had trouble like putting his hands together to pray, and he kind of had one hand a little bit bent, and he was actually making fun of himself.
We took him to the hospital. I remember just feeling like this is gonna be fine, this is nothing. But when every physician in the pediatric department was in the room, they looked way too concerned for my liking.
Everything changed. There was a huge 8 by 8 centimeter tumor in his right frontal brain. That night he was in the OR. The surgeon came and called us in and said, you know, we got everything out.
He wakes up like it was a nap.
He was so ready to play, so ready to get out. He was just back to baseline. And that 5 days later, when we got the actual diagnosis of what it was, which is atypical territorial rhabdoid tumor, this is a very rare cancer, occurs 1 in 2 million kids. That was the first spiral of devastating news. Our journey began. We went back to St. Jude for his interval scan 4 months later. Up until then, there was no evidence of cancer in his body. And within 6 weeks from his last scan, there are cotton balls all over in his spine, like tumor, recurrence, all over. I've never seen anything that bad. I remember hearing Jaymi scream so hard that actually scared me more than the news, just seeing how devastated she was.
When something feels bad, turn it around. When something feels bad, turn it around.
Thinking that maybe he would only be with us about 6 more weeks, and he was with us for 8 more months. And during those 8 months, we saw miracles. And we can't deny that. To see a little boy go from not being able to sit up by himself to dancing on a stage, it's just mind-blowing. We had some talks with Zion to try and let him know in a way that we could make a little 3-year-old understand that there's nothing more that the doctors can do to try to help you. And he said, I want to go home. And he said, I fought all the battles and I won. And I said, yes, you fought, baby. And he won.
He loved Spider-Man. And so it was befitting that, you know, in his passing, that's what he wore. Knowing Zion's life and his testimony and his love for music and his love for worship and just wanting to be in the presence of God, in our journey, those were the things that blessed us. Those opportunities to get him into something or to see people coming and just serving us in some way, shape, or form, maybe we can do that for others too.
And so one of the things that I think inspires us and gives us courage to go on is that Zion lived his life well. And I hear those words in my head, live well, don't waste it. Because as long as we're living, as long as we're still here on this earth, there is work to be done. So Out of Zion is a creative arts program for children with medical and special needs. And it basically has 3 components: discover, shine, refresh. Discover is bringing the children in for 6 weeks to learn new things in the arts. We spend that time just really getting to know the kids, providing them with new experiences in the arts, and practicing for this exciting opportunity called Shine. At Shine Production, we give the kids a chance to shine on the stage. It gives their parents also the opportunity to celebrate them, see them on a stage, invite all their friends. Refresh part is where we focus on giving the parents an opportunity to be refreshed. The opportunity is there to just be pampered for a little while. Being a part of Out of Zion can take any form. And we like to say that to people, like, bring what you love. Come alongside if this pulls at your heart and it just makes you want to be involved in the life of a child going through a hard time and a battle. If Zion has come into your world and you've heard and you've been touched, pay attention.
Each journey, each time, each high, each low, Zion taught us how to have faith in God. He was always looking at the bright side of things. He sang songs that were incredible. He taught us things that we just live by up to today. This is the day the Lord has made. We should rejoice and be glad in it. This day, this very day. Forget about tomorrow. Forget about yesterday. This day. God has given us. Rejoice in the Lord.
Thank you, Lord, for food.
For this day.
For this day. Thank you, Lord, for food for this day. And thank you for mommy and daddy and I don't know. Zion and everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
We are so thankful that you're sharing your story this morning, and I think a lot of us can say we've been through some tough things, but probably not like this. So could you, Jaymi and Kosj, just kind of share with us how you found strength on those days, those weeks, those months that it ended up being, and even after? How did you find strength in those really dark times?
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for the opportunity to share. And it's actually something that we continue to have to dig deep and figure out how to get through our dark days, because, as you know, they still come. And so I have a few thoughts on it, actually about 2, 3, maybe 4. And so, first of all, when you're going through something like this, finding strength is kind of the last thing you want to do. You kind of just want to curl up in a ball and hide under the covers and not come out. And so personally, that's kind of what I experienced in those darkest days early on, was not wanting to find strength, not wanting to find joy. But God, in His grace, He led me to certain resources. And so for me personally, books, retreats, podcasts, even friendship, community, really began to crack the window open a little bit and let some fresh air in. And also our daughter, I don't know how many of you know Yamoah, but she is a wonderful ball of joy and love and source of inspiration. And she has no idea right now, as a 5-year-old girl, what her impact has been on her family, particularly her mother, to give me the purpose to be able to get up and find the strength to live again. There's also a verse that has meant a lot to me during this journey, and it's 2 Corinthians 12:9, and it says, "My grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness." And for me, I'm weak, and that's okay, because that's the place where God can work.
Thank you, Jaymi. I think personally, I didn't have strength. In fact, on the contrary, I went through battles of the mind, knowing that this is what I believe, but this is what my mind is telling me, and nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. And during that process, it almost felt like the only thing that I could rely on was the relationship I had with God, that I could not deny that tangible knowledge of Him, that Jesus, I know you're real. I have that relationship with you. Nothing makes sense. None of this. In fact, in some ways, I was in a season of like, I think 24 hours, desperately having these doubts and these things that were in my mind that just was getting me in a state of confusion. I didn't want any help then. But recognizing that I could not deny who God is was the only thing that took me through. And another thing I wanted to share, just thinking about it, was that I think Jimmy and I had to quickly realize that we grieve differently. And we had to rediscover each other in a very unique way that we hadn't experienced before. And I thank God that we were able to work through that in the hard times of being on opposite channels of life. And sometimes she was grieving and I wasn't, and sometimes I was grieving and she wasn't. And recognizing and meeting each other's needs in those tough times was a tough situation, but was a learning process, and realizing that we are supposed to be there for each other and band together to really go through that was very important. And yeah.
You know, as we were watching the video, it just recalled to mind a particular Sunday at Bay Chapel, and those were some of the most difficult days, just walking through that season with you guys, and you talking about Zion's love for Spider-Man. I never forget it. I think it was Superhero Sunday. We had it at the other campus, and he came. I mean, he had the full-on costume. It was great, and I'll never forget him up there with all the kids just worshiping his heart out. And I remember that being also a pivotal season in his journey as well. But you talk about his love for music and worship. I just thought maybe you could share some of the songs and just what worship has meant to you guys over the last few years.
Absolutely. So that Sunday has meant so much to us, and we cling to the memory of that day. The song that they were singing was actually "Nothing is Impossible." And we'll never hear that song and not think of Zion, because you see a little boy battling cancer singing "Nothing is Impossible." It's just gives you chills. And so that was one of his favorite songs of that season, but he also loved the song "Good, Good Father" and "Trust in You" and "Loyal" and "Break Every Chain." And if you're familiar with those songs were very prophetic for the season, and Zion ministered to us through those songs and through his passion and his belief in the words that he was singing. He wasn't just passively singing, the boy believed it. He knew the words, he would sing and dance, and it was nonstop.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I vividly remember "Break Every Chain," there's power in the name of Jesus, and Zion would just be running around the living room non-stop, just singing that song like a lion let out of his cage. And he was in it. He understood the words. He really meant it, and it created this atmosphere of worship in the house, and we would just really bask in that. And for me personally, it impacted me in a big way when there came a time when he could not do it anymore, just because of his condition. And some of you might know this story already, but it got to a point where I could not hear those songs or even listen to them or even enjoy it the same way, because it was fraught with pain. And so, like everything else, I just did not. I just refused to do it. I refused to worship. I refused to sing. I refused to do everything. And I took a journey of restoration that several people helped me to really begin to reconnect. But one important thing one interesting incident that I think is worth sharing was when on the 3rd of July was actually one service at Tana Bartels, and through that healing process, Jen came out to me and said, "Hey, Kosj Jay, you're free to say no. Would you want to lead this song with me? It's just one service today." And right in that moment, I knew that as much as I wanted to say no, I had to say yes. It was a step of faith, a step of obedience to something that needed to happen. And so I knew that Zion would love me doing that anyway. I mean, that's what he did. That's what he lived by. But the pain of it was keeping me away from that very thing that I knew would bring me joy and bring him joy, right? And so right after that Sunday, I think on the 7th of July, that Thursday, he passed. And I know that if I hadn't taken that step of faith, I probably wouldn't have ever got around to do that again. And even after that, I took another 2-year journey, and some of you might know this, where I began to rediscover songs that really took me through the process and began to record them and spend some time in the studio and came up with the Journey to Zion album that really recapitulates a lot of that. But it was his life and of worship was totally part of the process for us.
Having Kosj Jay on the worship team and as a worship leader with me, their story has meant so much to me, because I didn't know that this was going on. Of course, we didn't know that Zion would be passing. We believed for a miracle and a healing, but what was so important to me was after he passed and after he went to heaven, probably about 2-3 weeks afterwards, I asked Kosj Jay again. I said, "I completely understand if you want to take off a year, 2 years, if you never want to do this again, but would you want to worship?" And he said yes. And when he came up on that stage that Sunday, the rest of the worship team, we were silenced. We were in awe, because we thought we knew what worship was. We thought we knew how to praise a good Father, but not until we saw Kosj Jay do it did we know what that true worshiper meant. So that's just always been so important to me, that you can see somebody worship, but you don't know their story. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But along those same lines, guys, we did believe for a healing, and we all prayed. You guys more than anyone, I'm sure. And when it didn't turn out the way you had prayed for, how did you deal with that? How do we, as your church family that are praying for something earnestly, if we don't see those results, how do we deal with that?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely a journey of faith when you're praying and believing for a healing, especially. But it kind of puts you in perspective when you realize, I'm not God. God is God. And He knows the ultimate plan for each and every one of us. And throughout the process and the journey, I think one of the comforts that I have accepted is that our son fulfilled his destiny. Zion was ultimately healed in heaven with his restored body, but those 4 years that he lived was his calling, and he lived that so well. And so if anybody is facing something like this and, believing for something and it's not coming to pass, we're the last ones to tell you, just give up, it's not gonna work. We're not those people. We believe in miracles, we believe in healing. So continue to pray, continue to hang on, continue to press in, because God is God, and we're not.
Thank you, Jamie. Absolutely. Healing is, you can be healed ultimately, which, God does, ultimate healing in a glorified body, like Jamie said. Or you could have temporary healing. In 100 years, none of us are going to be here. And so God can heal you whilst you're here, and God does heal you. But the real, for me, as much as it hurts so bad, we prayed for Zion's temporary healing. I was specific about that. I didn't leave it to chance. I asked God for that, and the answer was no. And it hurts. And as I say it now, I still grieve. It's still painful. It's like, God, really? You are the only one who can do this. I've searched all over the world, and I'm a researcher in oncology. If there is anywhere on the planet that I could go to heal my son, I will go. So you are the only one that can do this. And no? Really? So when you pray, what are you really doing? I believe that it's really, our prayer aligns us to the will of God. Our prayer is always answered in two ways. It could be, yes, your circumstance changes, or you change, or both. And God is always doing that in our lives. And if we don't pray, we lose the opportunity for God to do that. Whether He's going to do both, or He's not going to change your circumstance, but He's going to work in your life so that you become what He expects you to be and wants you to be in that circumstance. And regardless for what it is, prayer changes things. And I want to encourage anyone who is not sure about praying, pray. Pray for healing, pray in faith, believe God, and let Him change the circumstance, change you, or do both. But don't give up.
That's such a good word, man. I just have a couple more questions before we wrap our time up this morning. And the first is this, is obviously, it's clear to see that you've taken what is a tragedy and you've turned it into a testimony. I mean, there has been so much purpose that has come out of your pain. It's amazing. And I just want you to take a minute and share how God is using Out of Zion and Hope for ATRT to make a difference in other lives.
Well, we have to start by saying thank you to you both for standing beside us and supporting us when we were just so crazy and raw in our grief, and saying, guys, we want to start something. They said, yeah, let's do it. And they've been there every step of the way. This ministry, Out of Zion and Hope for ATRT, has breathed life back into our souls and used many of you who have volunteered and come alongside with us. It's an amazing work. It's a life-changing work, and it's changing us too.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I can say thank you enough.
And one last thing before we end our time. I don't know how you feel this morning, but I'm thinking through the list of problems that I've been dealing with this week, and they all feel real insignificant right now. All the things that have kept me up at night, all the challenges I'm dealing with, and I don't know the the pain in your life or the heartache. I know we're all going through different seasons and situations, but to see how God has pulled you through this is nothing short of miraculous. And I just want you to take a second and encourage somebody today that maybe is struggling or hurting or just needs to know that there's hope in their situation.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. If you're in that situation and you are facing despair, I know where you are. I've been there. Don't be afraid or intimidated by your frustration, by your grief, by the pain. It may feel like it's so big and so just unbearable or raw. But guess who can take it? Guess who can handle that? It's God. Don't turn away with that weight. Don't take it with you to your next thing. Bring it straight to the Father. He can take it. He can take your anger. He can take your pain. And wrestle. Wrestle, wrestle, wrestle. God gave me that word this morning. Wrestle with Him. Don't let go. You might walk away from that wrestle with a limp. You may still be hurting a little bit, but guess what? During that wrestle, He's going to give you a new name, a new purpose, a new calling, but you can't get there unless you wrestle.
Thank you so much, Jamie, just ministering to me as she was speaking about this. You know, we often read scripture and we read from verses 1 to 5 about how God transformed a life and through times of despair into times of victory. And that happens in 15 minutes, but we forget that it was a lifetime of a journey for that child of God. And so some of you might be here and you are in this place where you don't even see God. You don't even know if He hears you or if He's around or even if He cares about you, because everything seems to be going wrong. And I want to encourage you to know that your story is not over yet. It hasn't even begun yet. You know, there is this notion that sometimes we think when we're saved, it means everything is a trouble-free life. God never promised us that. In fact, the opposite. He said, in this life, you will have tribulations. In this life, you have trouble. But He said He has overcome the world. Even though you may be walking through the valley of the shadow of death, do not fear that evil, because He is with you. And like I said earlier, recognizing that relationship, recognizing that anchor, that you can anchor yourself on the solid rock and let the billows roll, let the waves beat at you, but you stay on the rock and watch Him see you through. It's difficult. And there are times that I'm going to work, I don't feel like going to work. I sit in my car just bawling, crying, because I'm like, God, what is this all about? I want my son back. I'll take him back any day and exchange it for all this stuff. But then I have to remember that He's right next to me. He's a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. He hears my pain. He feels it. And because of that, I can take the next step and walk into work. I can be kind to someone else. I can be a blessing to those around me. I just want to encourage you this morning, and that's all I got.
Well, guys, I just want to thank you so much for being so vulnerable to share your story. We love you, and you mean so much to our church family. You're an encouragement. You're an inspiration to us. And at Bay Chapel, this is us, and we're stronger together. And I know today we've all been encouraged. So would you just say thank you with me to Kosj and Jaymi for sharing their story this morning?